Are you ready to discover the most terrifying side of Japanese culture? Today we will reveal yokais that go far beyond the most well-known legends, creatures so frightening that even the Japanese avoid mentioning them. For those who don't know, yokais are supernatural beings from Japanese folklore, reflections of fears and mysteries that span generations. Some are mischievous, others harmless, but the ones we will see today are on a completely different level. What if I told you that you might have crossed paths with one of them without knowing? Maybe that feeling of being watched or the strange silence of the night. Get ready. These stories will not only give you goosebumps but will also stick with you long after you learn about them. Are you ready? Then put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and hide well under the blanket, because now the fear begins. Let's go. Amana. The Amana, or Rain Woman, is one of the most enigmatic and disturbing yokais in Japanese folklore. Her name already carries an omen of misfortune, associated with sudden rains that often herald her appearance. Originating from the mountainous regions of Japan, the Amana is frequently mentioned in stories passed down orally by villagers living in isolated areas, where storms are seen as both natural and supernatural phenomena. Her appearance is both melancholic and unsettling. The Amana is described as a woman with long, always drenched hair that drips as if she has just come from a torrential rain. Her deep, tired eyes, almost dull, hide a profound mystery, while her smile, seemingly calm, provokes undeniable discomfort. Her clothes, eternally wet, cling to her pale skin, making her figure an ambulant omen of calamity. The most well-known legend about the Amana is as chilling as her descriptions. In a remote village, children mysteriously disappeared during a heavy rain that started abruptly. Desperate mothers reported seeing a shadowy figure dancing in the fog, holding something that seemed to be a small package or a child. When the storm passed, only wet footprints were found, leading into the dense forest and disappearing among the trees. None of the children were seen again, and the villagers grew to fear sudden rains even more. More than just a kidnapper, the Amana is often interpreted as a reflection of unbearable grief. Some stories suggest that she may be the spirit of a mother who lost her own child in a flood or a storm and now wanders eternally, seeking to fill the void of her loss. Her presence in legends is thus a reminder of the uncontrollable forces of nature and human suffering in the face of them. The figure of the Amana also carries strong symbolism related to vulnerability. Rain, often celebrated as a source of life, becomes, in the legends of this yokai, a vehicle of sadness and terror. This reflects the ancient fear of unexpected climatic events and the impact they can have on isolated communities, especially those that depend on a delicate balance with nature. And if you think the Amana is just a story to scare children, it's worth thinking twice. There are contemporary reports of people who swear they have seen a similar figure amidst heavy rains and fog, especially in rural and mountainous areas. Some say they heard a female voice whispering in the wind, calling for something or someone, while others report only an overwhelming sense of melancholy when crossing an unexpected storm. If there is something that makes the Amana so frightening, it is the fact that she always seems to be nearby. After all, who hasn't felt a chill hearing the sound of raindrops hitting the window on a dark and lonely night? And who can guarantee that, when looking into the fog, you won't see a shadowy figure, smiling in an unsettling way, lurking among the shadows? Perhaps the next time you hear rain start without warning, ask yourself, is it just a natural phenomenon, or the harbinger of the Amana's arrival? What seems to be a simple storm may hide something much more sinister. Futakuchi Onor. The Futakuchi Onor, known as the woman with two mouths, is one of the most disturbing and symbolic figures in Japanese folklore. Her name accurately describes her most striking feature. In addition to the normal mouth that we all have, she has a second mouth hidden at the back of her head, among her hair. This extra mouth is not just a grotesque element, but also the center of her insatiable and terrifying nature. At first glance, the Futakuchi Onor appears to be an ordinary woman, even attractive depending on the story. Her initial appearance is perfectly normal, which makes her even more dangerous. It is only over time or under specific circumstances that her true nature is revealed. This second mouth, full of sharp teeth, has a life of its own. It is capable of devouring large quantities of food, and its movements are described as frighteningly independent, with lips that open and close, while emitting strange and guttural sounds. One of the most famous legends about the Futakuchi Onor tells the story of a greedy farmer who married a woman who seemed perfect in his eyes. She was beautiful, hard-working, and best of all, she never ate anything. To the farmer, this was a dream, as he could save on the household's sustenance. However, over time, he began to notice something strange. His food supplies were disappearing rapidly, even though no one else lived in the house. One day, overcome by suspicion, the farmer decided to observe his wife while she slept. It was then that he discovered the terrible truth. By lifting her hair, he saw the second mouth voraciously devouring a bag of rice that was stored. As the teeth crushed the grains forcefully, the mouth whispered in a hoarse and hungry voice, "I'm hungry. I want more." The sight was so terrifying that, according to the legend, the farmer went insane and fled, leaving the woman behind. The myth of the Futakuchi Onor is laden with deep symbolism. She represents the danger of judging people solely by their appearances or first impressions. Beneath her common and attractive facade lies a voracious, insatiable, and uncontrollable being. For some scholars of Japanese folklore, the Futakuchi Onor also symbolizes issues such as repression and hidden secrets, especially related to suppressed desires or needs that end up surfacing in a monstrous form. Another fascinating aspect of the Futakuchi Onor is the origin of her second mouth. Some stories say it is the result of a curse, usually linked to an act of greed or selfishness committed by herself or someone close to her. In other versions, the mouth appears as punishment for neglecting or wasting food, showing how myths often carry profound moral lessons. Even in modern times, some see the Futakuchi Onor as a metaphor for the masks people wear daily. How often do we encounter individuals who seem perfect on the outside, but carry secrets or intentions that are not evident at first glance? This duality between appearance and essence is a central theme in the stories of this frightening figure. And you, would you have the courage to look beyond appearances? The Futakuchi Onor is a sinister reminder that not everything is as it seems. Beneath an attractive face or harmless behavior, insatiable desires, dangerous secrets, or even true monstrosity may be hidden. Perhaps the next time you meet someone who seems too perfect, it would be wise to observe more closely. After all, who can say what is hidden well behind their backs? Uwan. The Uwan, known as the Spirit of Sounds, is an entity that causes chills not because of its appearance, but because of what cannot be seen. This yokai inhabits abandoned places, ruins, old houses, deserted schools, and is famous for the sound that gives rise to its name, a sudden and loud scream, Uwan, that makes the heart race and the bones vibrate. Unlike many yokais, it does not have a defined form, which makes it even more mysterious and frightening. The description of the Uwan is both simple and enigmatic. It is invisible to human eyes. Some reports say that its presence can be perceived as a dense fog or a sudden change in the ambient temperature. However, the Uwan rarely manifests visually. Its existence is perceived almost exclusively through the sounds it produces, sudden noises, echoing footsteps, or the terrifying scream that reverberates in empty spaces. It is this absence of form that amplifies the fear, as what cannot be seen seems much harder to combat or understand. One of the most famous stories involving the Uwan took place in an abandoned school in the interior of Japan, a place already surrounded by rumors of hauntings. A group of children decided to explore the building after hearing legends about it. As they walked through the dark, dusty corridors, a shrill and unexpected sound tore through the silence. Uwan! It was so loud and sudden that the children felt the ground vibrate beneath their feet. Terrified, they ran toward the exit, but each step they took was accompanied by echoes, not only the sounds of their own movements, but also additional footsteps, as if something or someone was following them. When they finally left the building, no logical explanation was found. What was pursuing them seemed to have stayed behind, but the trauma of that day haunted them for a long time. The figure of the Uwan is not associated with physical attacks or deaths, but with the psychological terror it provokes. It is the type of yokai that plays with the minds of its victims, planting doubt and feeding the fear of the unknown. Unlike more visceral or corporeal entities, such as the Futakuchi Onor, the Uwan is a master of suggestion. Its strength lies in provoking the sensation that something is wrong, a sound where there should be silence, an echo where there should be nothing. The Uwan can be interpreted as a representation of the most primordial human fears. It evokes the terror we feel when alone in dark and desolate places where our imagination creates forms and sounds that do not exist. It also symbolizes the connection between abandoned spaces and the residual energies that seem to inhabit them, as if forgotten places carry memories that do not want to be disturbed. An important lesson we can take from the myth of the Uwan is respect for the unknown. Abandoned places often have tragic or dark histories, and the presence of this yokai can be seen as a manifestation of those memories. Exploring these places may seem exciting or challenging, but is it really worth risking encountering what is hidden within them? And you, would you have the courage to enter an abandoned building, knowing that the Uwan might be lurking? The next time you pass by an old house or a decommissioned factory and feel a strange change in the environment, a disturbing silence, or a sound that shouldn't be there, it might be better to stay away. After all, there are things that cannot be seen but can certainly be heard, and once you hear Uwan, you will never be able to forget it. Uboom. The Uboom, or the mother spirit, is one of the most tragic and melancholic yokais in Japanese culture. This spirit emerges when a mother dies during childbirth or leaves her children abruptly, whether due to tragedy, abandonment, or some other unfortunate circumstance. Her existence is tied to grief, regret, and the desperate search to fulfill the role of a mother, even after death. She is a figure deeply laden with sadness, but also with mystery and terror. The appearance of the Uboom reflects the tragedy of her story. She is described as a woman with pale, almost translucent skin, wearing old clothes stained with blood, traces of her death during childbirth or a traumatic event. The most striking detail is the baby she carries in her arms. This baby, seemingly defenseless and silent, is central to the appearances of the Uboom and the way she interacts with the living. Her expression, usually one of pain and plea, seems to beg for help, but hides intentions that are both mysterious and disturbing. One of the most well-known stories about the Uboom involves a man who, on a rainy night, was crossing a deserted bridge. Midway, he was startled by a strange woman who appeared distressed and was holding a baby in her arms. She begged him to hold the child, saying she needed help. Moved by compassion, the man agreed, but as soon as he held the baby, he noticed something terrible. The weight of the child began to increase supernaturally, becoming unbearable. He tried to return it, but when he looked back, he saw that the woman had disappeared. Upon closer examination, he realized that the baby was no longer a baby. In his hands was only a heavy stone, wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. Terrified, the man dropped the object and fled, haunted by the encounter. The myth of the Uboom is especially impactful because it blends elements of compassion and danger. Her figure represents the instinctive desire to help someone in need, but simultaneously warns about the price of getting involved with supernatural forces. Many believe that the Uboom does not act out of malice, but out of desperation. She seeks to alleviate the weight of her own pain by transferring it, literally or metaphorically, to those who cross her path. The Uboom is a personification of maternal suffering. In some interpretations, her presence also serves as a reminder of the dangers of negligence or abandonment. In Japan, where the role of the mother is deeply valued, the myth of the Uboom touches a sensitive point: the fear of failing one's children or being unable to protect them. At the same time, the figure of this spirit also reflects the tensions between life and death and the unbreakable connection between mother and child, even in extreme circumstances. It is said that the Uboom frequently appears in places where family tragedies have occurred. Bridges, intersections, and abandoned hospitals are some of the settings associated with her. People who claim to have encountered the spirit report a mix of overwhelming sadness and paralyzing fear, as if they could feel the burden of the grief she carries. In some stories, those who try to help her end up being haunted by nightmares or misfortunes, as if the weight of the child they held never truly leaves them. And you, would you have the courage to heed the plea for help from a strange woman on a dark night? The myth of the Uboom challenges us to reflect on the cost of compassion and the danger of getting involved with the unknown. Sometimes even the simplest act, the holding of a baby in your arms can carry terrible consequences. So, the next time you hear a plea in the middle of the night, think twice before responding. After all, some help can come at a high cost. A very high cost. Yamachichi. The Yamachichi, also known as the life sucker, is a parasitic yokai feared by those living in isolated villages. It is a mysterious creature that attacks silently during the night, draining the life force of its victims to prolong its own existence. Its appearances are always surrounded by suffocating terror, as its target rarely notices the attack until it is too late. Physically, the Yamachichi is described as small and wrinkled, resembling a bent and fragile old man, but its appearance is deceptive. Its eyes glow like embers in the dark, reflecting an insatiable hunger. It moves stealthily and almost imperceptibly, entering houses without making a sound, always lurking for its next victim. Despite its fragile appearance, it possesses supernatural strength when it comes to subduing its targets and sucking their vital energy. One of the most terrifying stories involving the Yamachichi tells of an elderly woman who began to mysteriously fall ill. For weeks, she seemed to be losing her vitality, but no doctor could explain the cause of her condition. One night, worried, her husband decided to stay awake to observe his wife. Around midnight, he saw something he would never forget. A small, wrinkled and hunched creature was on top of his wife's chest. Its long, thin hands held her face as it murmured in a guttural voice, "I need your life to continue living." When confronted, the Yamachichi quickly fled through the window, disappearing into the darkness of the night. The woman survived but never fully regained her health, as if a part of her life had been taken forever. The myth of the Yamachichi is a warning about human vulnerability, especially during sleep when we are most defenseless. It also reflects the ancestral fear of invisible forces that can infiltrate our homes and lives without our noticing. In many villages, people took specific precautions to avoid the Yamachichi, such as locking doors and windows at nightfall, spreading salt on doorways, or even hanging protective amulets around their beds. In addition to being a physical predator, the Yamachichi is often interpreted as a symbol of emotional or psychological parasitism. It personifies what drains us, slowly and silently, whether toxic relationships, mysterious illnesses, or even the weight of daily worries. Its attack is sneaky, and its victim rarely perceives the impact until they are exhausted and weakened. It is said that the Yamachichi carefully selects its victims, preferring people who are already weakened or vulnerable. This reinforces the belief that it is attracted to fragility, whether physical or emotional. However, in some stories, it is also described as an opportunistic being, attacking anyone who does not take adequate precautions. Therefore, the myth is often used to remind people of the importance of protecting their personal space and ensuring the safety of their homes. Have you ever left a window open during the night without thinking twice? Or perhaps ignored that uneasy feeling that something is out of place while you sleep? The Yamachichi teaches us that even the smallest oversights can have frightening consequences. Locking doors and windows may seem like a simple gesture, but in the villages where this yokai is feared, this precaution can be the difference between a good night's sleep and an encounter that will steal more than just your tranquility. The next time you go to sleep, pay attention to the small details around you. An unusual noise, an open window you swore you had closed, or even the feeling of a strange weight in the environment. Everything could be a sign that the Yamachichi is nearby. After all, it only needs one chance, a breach, to enter, and when that happens, it always leaves taking something from you. Gashadokuro. The Gashadokuro, also known as the ferocious skeleton, is a monstrous entity that embodies the terror and fury of human tragedies. Its name perfectly describes its nature, a colossal entity formed from the bones of people who died tragically, especially during times of famine or war. The Gashadokuro is a somber reminder that past sufferings and injustices can manifest in frighteningly physical ways, haunting the living. Its appearance is as terrifying as its name suggests. Imagine a gigantic skeleton, much larger than any human being, with sharp teeth that seem capable of crushing even rocks and eyes that glow like flames in the dark. Although it moves in complete silence, its presence is often announced by the sound of cracking bones, a dry and metallic noise that sends chills even to the bravest souls. It is said that when a Gashadokuro is nearby, it is impossible to ignore the weight of its presence. The air feels denser, and a sense of imminent death takes over all your senses. One of the most spine-chilling stories involving the Gashadokuro speaks of a solitary traveler crossing a deserted forest at midnight. Despite the location being enveloped in absolute silence, he began to hear a strange sound, as if bones were being crushed. Before he could react, he felt something invisible grab his head. The Gashadokuro, with its enormous and invisible hands in the darkness, easily lifted him. Reports say that his head was crushed as if it were a fragile egg. The next morning, no evidence of the traveler was found except for the sound of distant screams echoing through the forest for days, as if the spirit of the victim was still trapped in the tragedy. The origin of the Gashadokuro is deeply rooted in stories of collective suffering. It is formed when the spirits of people who died painfully, whether from hunger, abandonment, or the horrors of war, cannot find rest. Their scattered and forgotten bones accumulate and eventually give rise to this creature. The Gashadokuro has no loyalties or reasons for its existence. It is pure instinct, driven only by an incessant hunger to consume more victims and increase its power. But the Gashadokuro is not just a figure of terror. It also serves as a symbol of the lasting effects of traumatic events. In Japanese villages, its legend was often used as a somber reminder to honor the dead and respect the remains of those who have passed, especially in difficult times. Abandoning bodies without giving them a proper burial or forgetting the tragedies of past generations could lead to the creation of a Gashadokuro, a manifestation of the collective pain that the living have neglected. Like many yokais, the Gashadokuro can be avoided, at least theoretically. It is said that it only appears at midnight, and its arrival can be sensed by a strange feeling of cold running down the spine or a sudden buzzing in the ears. If you hear the sound of cracking bones in the silence of the night, the best course of action is to flee immediately. However, few survive to tell if they really managed to escape. There is something particularly terrifying about the fact that the Gashadokuro cannot be defeated. Unlike other monsters that can be fought with weapons or rituals, it is the personification of human pain and despair, something immortal and impossible to destroy. Its existence is a constant reminder that unresolved tragedies and forgotten sufferings can return, larger and more dangerous to haunt the living. Would you have the courage to cross a deserted forest, knowing that the Gashadokuro might be lurking in the shadows? The next time you are alone in a remote place and hear a strange sound, think twice before ignoring it. After all, if the Gashadokuro is nearby, it is because it is hungry, and no one wants to be the next victim of its insatiable appetite. Mokumokuren, the eyes in the walls. The Mokumokuren, translated as countless eyes, is a disturbing yokai that manifests in forgotten or neglected environments. Its presence is linked to houses or rooms with paper doors or walls, a traditional Japanese style called shoji. Over time, these surfaces can develop holes or tears, and it is precisely in these small spaces that the Mokumokuren appears, turning something mundane into a spectacle of pure terror. Visually, the Mokumokuren is described in a simple manner, but its appearance is deeply unsettling. From each hole in the wall or door emerge eyes. Many eyes. Some large and attentive, others small and blinking incessantly. These eyes seem to have a life of their own, moving from side to side, following the movements of anyone who dares to stay in the same room. There is no body or face associated with these eyes, only the penetrating gaze that never blinks or diverts. One of the most frightening legends about the Mokumokuren tells the story of a woman who lived alone in an old, poorly maintained house. Over the years, she noticed holes forming in the paper doors of her house, but never bothered to fix them. One night, while preparing to sleep, she felt as though she was being watched. Looking at the paper door, she was paralyzed with terror. Dozens of eyes were staring at her. As she tried to scream, the eyes began to blink in sync, as if hypnotizing her. When she finally managed to run away, she reported feeling the eyes following every step until she reached the door. The next day, the woman left the house and never returned. Although the Mokumokuren rarely attacks physically, its presence is profoundly disturbing. It symbolizes the fear of being watched, the feeling that something or someone is always lurking, even when you believe you are alone. For many people, the idea of being under constant surveillance is as terrifying as a physical threat, and that is what makes the Mokumokuren so effective as a yokai. It plays with our most primitive insecurities, the discomfort of being exposed, watched, and judged. There is also an interesting cultural interpretation of the Mokumokuren. In ancient times, its legend was used as a warning to take good care of houses and their surroundings. A neglected house with damaged doors and walls was seen as a conducive place for spirits and negative energies. The Mokumokuren, in this sense, is a reminder that neglect can attract unwanted consequences, both in the physical and spiritual worlds. However, dealing with the Mokumokuren is theoretically simple. Just repair the holes in the walls or paper doors. In Japan, it is believed that by fixing the damaged surfaces, the yokai will lose its connection to the place and disappear. This practical solution reflects the wisdom contained in many Japanese legends, which often combine the mystical with lessons of everyday life. Have you ever felt that uneasy sensation of being watched, even when you are alone? The Mokumokuren makes us question what might be hidden in the small imperfections of the environment around us. The next time you notice a hole in a wall or window, will you have the courage to look through it? After all, you might find a pair of eyes watching you from the other side, or many blinking silently as they wait for the next move. Akonami, the bathroom cleaner. The Akonami, whose name literally means filth licker, is a peculiar yokai that inhabits the dirtiest and most neglected corners of a house. Although it does not have the most threatening appearance among yokais, it is a deeply uncomfortable creature because of the place it chooses to live, abandoned or poorly maintained bathrooms. Its presence is a reminder that lack of hygiene can attract more than just insects. It can attract an entity that transforms dirt into its food. Physically, the Akonami is described as a small and deformed creature, with reddish or greenish skin, depending on the version of the legend. It has a long, viscous tongue, which it uses to lick dirt, mold, and impurities accumulated in the dirtiest corners. Its eyes are large and bright, always attentive to the slightest trace of dirt, while its sharp nails help it dig between the cracks of stones and tiles. Although not aggressive, its presence is so repulsive that few people dare to remain in the same environment as it. One of the most well-known stories about the Akonami tells of a family that moved into an old house in the countryside. The house's bathroom, small and dark, had not been used for years and was full of accumulated mold and dirt. Despite warnings from neighbors to keep the place clean, the family ignored them and continued to leave the bathroom in its state. One night, the youngest son woke up and went to the bathroom, where he saw something horrible. A creature crouched on the floor with its long tongue scraping the mold off the walls and drinking the dirty water from the sink. Terrified, he screamed. But when the parents arrived, the creature had already disappeared, leaving only the sound of something wet dragging across the floor. Although the Akonami is not known for attacking humans, its existence serves as an important warning. It symbolizes the danger of neglecting hygiene and cleanliness. In ancient times, when diseases caused by lack of sanitation were common, the legend of the Akonami was used as a way to teach children and adults to keep bathrooms clean. The idea that a supernatural creature could appear to feed on dirt was effective in encouraging cleanliness and preventing diseases. The Akonami is also interesting from a psychological perspective. It represents the discomfort we feel in dirty or neglected places, especially in bathrooms, which are traditionally associated with purification and cleanliness in Japan. Its presence turns these spaces into something contaminated and impure, which exacerbates the feeling of repulsion. Despite its grotesque appearance, the Akonami is not inherently evil. It does not seek to harm humans directly, but its mere presence is a reminder that neglect can bring about unpleasant consequences. In some interpretations, it is even considered a supernatural caretaker that appears to clean the corners that humans have neglected, albeit in a deeply disturbing way. And you, how is the cleanliness of your house? The next time you feel lazy to clean the bathroom or leave a room dirty for too long, think twice. The Akonami might be lurking, ready to lick the accumulated dirt. After all, it doesn't need to be invited to appear, it just takes a little neglect, and it will be there, hidden in the darkest corner, waiting for the next opportunity. What makes these stories so enduring? Are they just myths created by human imagination? Or is there some truth behind them? In Japan, many still believe that yokais are real and their reports continue to emerge. If you are intrigued by these scary stories and want to delve even deeper into the mysterious universe of Japanese folklore, I have a special tip for you. There is a playlist full of Japan's urban legends, featuring the most enigmatic creatures, the scariest spirits, and stories that will send chills down your spine. It is the most complete on the internet, perfect for those who want to explore every detail of this fascinating and unsettling world. How about taking a look? You might find something you've never heard before, or perhaps even discover a legend that seems all too familiar.